Yeah, that's not fine. Well, it's still nice. But there's no shotgun at all. It's the shotgun is complete light, and for that reason, the class is dangerous. Right. It's not cool. It's all polished by me. That's you, that's not cool, man. That's polished stainless. That's all polished alloy. That's all polished alloy. Polished stainless, polished stainless. Well, that's cool. It's a bit that's cool. Like this, it's polished. Yeah, that fucking slaps. They've got 75, that's got 3 1. With 5 15, 75, that's good. I'm feeling like 90, it's going to all day. Stand up. No, everything stand up. All the stand up. There's no base. Oh, that's off PR1, yes, for the base. Because I just have, I can't make one. On the other. And base. Oh, what's that? What's that? I'm sorry, somebody use some control start. That's one start. Last time I started 56 times. I don't know. I don't know. 56 times. I just put them. It's complex. No, it's just the once. I'm sorry. That's why I'm not sure. I'm not sure. What's that anymore? Well, I can't find it. I'm not sure. I'm doing that. I know this is testing 1983. I'm not testing. So you got to faster. You like this to go and try. Just like a pivot stop. Yeah. Yeah, 1985. Ja, kan toch zien, dat is test. Go aan verkleden en dan is het 19 altijd. Go aan verkleden. Dat is best. Go aan verkleden, dat is test. Go aan dat is 1990. Ben 1990. Dat is test met af te aan. Maar nu people can do this. But I think the rules are not good. You know, for teams you have to take off fast forward. It's not fast forward. Yeah. It's fast. Yeah. Right. Right. Okay, right. What's that? Yeah, I think what's the yeah, what's the no, that's what. Hell, that's it. That's what you said. That's what you said. That's 4 weeks. That's 2.5 years. It's much better than what's that. That's so fuck. I think it was going to make sure. fully explains what I'm for. Just okay, I'm just me. I'm myself. Let's see the TV. Let's see you. So fucking nothing. And fucking for fucking
这里走。